Hello, 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 and welcome everyone to tonight's final fireside chat with Jarrod Barnes and Piersten Gaines. Boy, are you all in for a treat as we talk all about applying leadership skills through sports. This conversation will be moderated by my wonderful colleague, Mr. Ryan Reynolds, and following the moderated discussion, we'll have a live Q&A session. We urge all of our participants to submit questions to the Q&A function, and if you like, you'll have the opportunity to come on live and ask your question. For all of our season 3 participants, don't forget that you can win a pizza party. We'll be announcing the winner of that this coming Thursday. So make sure you're engaging with us on social media, Instagram, and Twitter. You can tag us at Trey Athletes. Be sure to check us out on Instagram for additional rules for the social media contest. Tonight's chat is presented by Trey Athletes. We are a Dallas-based youth sports nonprofit, and our mission is to empower athletes to be leaders, role models, and influential voices for their communities. We believe that by providing high school athletes with the opportunity to learn from amazing speakers, such as Piersten and Jarrod, they will be provided with necessary insights that can help ensure their successes on and off the court or field. I'll be back at the end of the conversation to share a few reminders, so make sure you stick around. I hope you all enjoyed this amazing conversation. And with that, Brian, I'm handing it off to you.
Thank you so much, LaJoy, and welcome, everyone. I'm Brian Reynolds, co-founder and co-CEO at Trey Athletes. And tonight, can I just say, y'all are in for a special treat. For our very last conversation in Trey Season 3, we're going to be discussing how to apply leadership skills through sport. And we are incredibly fortunate to be joined by two former college athletes who are both making huge waves in the business world. Piersten Gaines, founder and CEO of Press Roots Salon, and Jarrod Barnes, analyst for venture capital fund Emerson Collective. First up is our good friend, California native and former college soccer player turned beauty entrepreneur, Piersten Gaines. Piersten is the founder and CEO of Press Roots, the very first luxury express salon experience that specializes in styling for women of color with highly textured hair. After growing up near San Francisco, Piersten's uber-competitive soccer career took her from Northern California to Columbia University in New York City, where she played on the Lions Division I women's soccer team. After graduating from Columbia with a bachelor's degree in political science, Piersten lived in New York City, where she was a fashion retail professional, working for companies such as Calvin Klein, Prada, Gilt Group, and Bloomingdale's in roles ranging from operations to merchandising and buying. In 2016, while she was attending Harvard Business School, Piersten's passion for making women feel great about themselves sparked the concept of Press Roots. After a lifetime of traumatizing salon experiences, including losing her hair multiple times, Piersten created Press Roots for the 42 million US women with textured hair who just want a brand that prioritizes both their health and their experience. Since launch, Press Roots pop-up salons have sold out in major cities across the country. Piersten opened her flagship salon right here in Dallas, Texas in March of 2020, and she's already earned some incredible accolades, including Dallas's best salon for textured hair by the Dallas Observer and most highly rated salons in North America by Yelp. It is our distinct pleasure at Trey Athletes to welcome Piersten Gaines.
Thank you for having me. I love that bio. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very, very welcome, my friend. Next up is our good friend, Ohio native and former college football player turned venture capital investor, Jarrod Barnes. A native of Columbus, Ohio, Jarrod is a proud alum and former college football player for both the University of Louisville and The Ohio State University. After graduating from Louisville in 3 years with a bachelor's degree in kinesiology, Jarrod earned a spot on the Buckeyes football team while also earning his master's degree from Ohio State in sports management. Additionally, Jarrod was the first ever Ohio State football player to pursue a PhD while on the active roster. After graduation, Jarrod began his career as a football coach at Ohio State and Clemson, and later he worked in professional sports with the Los Angeles Rams. Jarrod currently serves as a venture analyst with Emerson Collective, investing in early stage companies across health and wellness, education, and workforce development. Prior to joining Emerson Collective, Jarrod was a venture fellow at Unshackled Ventures, an investment partner with the Dorm Room Fund, and the first hire for the Minority Entrepreneurship Institute, a nonprofit incubator founded by NFL athlete Jalen Smith. Jarrod is passionate about all things EdTech and the future of work. He previously founded Prime U, a learning and development platform for sports teams, and the Athlete Development Lab, a community for sports tech professionals. Currently, in addition to his responsibilities at Emerson, Jarrod is working to complete his doctorate in learning design at the University of Illinois. A very special welcome to Jarrod Barnes.
Thank you, Brian. Really excited to be here this evening.
Pleasure is all ours, my friend. So for those of you watching and listening at home tonight, we're going to be diving deep on the topic of applying leadership skills learned through sport. Both Piersten and Jarrod are former college athletes, so they know what it takes to be successful both on the field and in the business world. They've both earned multiple degrees and successfully founded their own companies. Additionally, Piersten and Jarrod credit much of their success to the skills they learned through sports, which they've transferred into their careers and their everyday lives. And the thing is, so many of the skills that we learn in high school and college sports are transferable to other areas of our life. Tonight, we're going to connect the dots between the skills you learn as an athlete and how to use those abilities to be successful beyond sports. So to kick things off, this first question is for both of you. Let's start with Piersten actually on this before throwing it to Jarrod. Tell us about yourself by answering these two questions. Number one, where are you from? And number two, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grow up?
I was born in Dallas. I moved to the Bay Area in California when I was 6 years old. So I grew up in California, and I wanted to be a lot of things throughout my childhood, ranging from doctor to astronaut, really everything. But once I got to high school, I was really involved in leadership and in student government. And so I wanted to do something in politics actually when I was in high school.
Very cool. So are we looking at Mayor Piersten gains, Senator Piersten gains, President Piersten gains? Like the sky's the limit at this point, I feel like.
My political aspirations are no longer. I did have, when I was in high school, I thought I was going to be the first Black female president.
Never say never, my friend. That's really incredible, Piersten. Thank you so much for sharing. Jarrod, kicking it to you. Talk to us about where you grew up and what you wanted to be.
Originally from Columbus, Ohio, born and raised in the Midwest through and through. And growing up, we really only had two movies in our household. One was Remember the Titans. The other was Apollo 13. So growing up, I fell in love with the game of football pretty early, but also really wanted to be an astronaut after watching Apollo 13. And I went to space camp actually in sixth grade in Huntsville, Alabama. And, once we went through all the tests and everything and got to actually physics and the math and kind of quantitative portion, that's when I tapped out. I said, you know what, I'm gonna try football, see how that goes for me. But hopefully still maybe one day we'll make it to the moon. But yeah, that's what I wanted to be growing up.
That's awesome. I think President Gaines will be signing off on those checks to NASA when you're heading up to the moon. So just be on the lookout. So next up, and starting off with you, Jarrod, could you please kind of walk us through your career to date and describe your current job responsibilities for the high schoolers at home in simple terms?
Absolutely. So, first of all, thank you for the introduction. You guys did a phenomenal job with the bios. I'm like, man, I don't know who that guy is, but I want to meet him. So like I said, I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio. Grew up with very, very humble beginnings. Grew up in a single parent home with just my mother and I. And, honestly, my mother was working so much. I found myself as an only child wanting to stay busy. And that came in the form of playing football. Fell in love with the game of football at an early age. I started playing when I was 5 and, honestly didn't want to stop when I did stop playing. And, football for me was actually such a huge medium to my own personal development, to everything from just grit to confidence to identity. I'm of mixed race. So my mother was white, my father was Black. And, for me, football was the one arena where I could truly just be me. Right. It was really the area where I could own and say, hey, you know what, this is Jarrod. I'm really going to go blaze a trail and kind of create the path in which I want to create through football. And ultimately, that's what, was a great medium and access point to me gaining a solid education. Had an opportunity to end up at the University of Louisville. I wasn't a premier 5-star recruit like a lot of folks listening tonight. I started my career as a walk-on, and a lot of folks, sometimes they say it, sometimes they don't. I'm actually really proud because, being a walk-on, it forced me to truly own my own development. I could not rely on a coach to coach me up. I could not rely on a tuition bill being paid. I had to find a way to cover that, on my own. Lo and behold, that mindset, that mentality allowed me to end up being put on scholarship after my redshirt freshman year. Ended up starting 23 games at the University of Louisville and graduated early, right? I tell folks I wasn't overly smart. I just showed up to class and did the little things really, really well. And that ultimately put me on this accelerated trajectory where, finished my degree early after my redshirt sophomore season. And I said, hey, I could stay here. I could, really continue to coast, and I'm in a good system. I know this, I can do this, but I had this itch, this urge to continually just be around the best, right? That was the one common theme that has been a huge part of my life is I just want to surround myself with the best talent, the best coaches in whatever sector it is. I just want to be around the best. And, at that time that looked like Ohio State. They had just won the national championship coming off that 2015 season where they beat Oregon in the national championship, Marcus Mariota and that team. And I said, you know what, let's see how good we can be. So I actually end up joining Ohio State again as a walk-on in that program. So walked on twice, end up finishing my master's degree, get a scholarship in my senior season there. And, it was just an incredible journey I'm so grateful for. And, at that time, football, and I'm sure Piersten, you can relate so much with soccer, college sports, it's such a huge part of your life. So even though as a young kid, I had the desire to explore and, do things such as be an astronaut, at that time, I was all in on football, right? All degrees aside, all pedigrees aside, I was all in. And so I decided to pursue the NFL, ended up not getting a chance to make a roster. And, I was devastated. That was a really hard thing for me. I put my heart and soul into the game and really committed myself fully. But, I decided to take that energy. I said, hey, if I can't play, how could I give back through the game and go be a coach? So really found an opportunity there as a coach at the time, coaching football at Ohio State, but then said, hey, could I take that another step and see how we could scale the best of what I had learned at that time through Ohio State into other institutions that may not have access or exposure to that experience. That, long story short, morphed into the company, Brian, you mentioned, of being Prime U, which, started as an idea on a sheet of paper and scaled up to working with about 30 different sports teams across the US. And ironically, one of those teams we worked with was the LA Rams. So worked with them as a contractor for about a year, and then they ended up offering me an opportunity to join the organization full time. And, Brian, I'm sure you can attest to this. A majority of the jobs that, folks say they just fall into often don't have an application, right? It comes through building strong relationships, and it comes through just being great before you're asked to be great, right? If I could just boil it down to be so simple, it's like just being great before somebody expects you to be great. And that happened. And I had a chance to work with the LA Rams for 2 seasons, overseeing our athlete marketing initiatives. So really, in a sense, I try to keep it simple by saying creating immersive experiences for fans to expand the brand of the Rams. Right. So that could look like things as a Gatorade commercial. It could look like things, partnerships with Snapchat. It could look like, things that we did with Verizon and the 5G lab, and really, again, pushed me to be creative and tapped into a lot of these things that I mentioned as a kid that I didn't really get to, channel as an athlete. And lo and behold, that again really prompted me to take the next step of, man, how can I surround myself with great creators, innovators, folks who are just thinking about crazy ideas such as going to the moon. And that led me to an organization called Emerson Collective, which Emerson Collective is a social change organization that was started by Lorraine Powell Jobs, the wife of the late Steve Jobs, about 15 years ago. And about 10 years ago, they launched an investment arm of the organization that really focuses on infusing capital into organizations that are, in a sense, doing the most good for the most people. Right. So that's really where I sit, is looking at companies specifically within education that are really creating how we learn in the future. So that has been the journey to date, high level, but hope that answers your question.
100%. And I think that we already saw a comment down below, but being great before you're asked to be great is such excellent advice. So just have to call that out, number one. And number two, our Trey athletes are probably sick of this. I think I've mentioned this twice now, but my mom always told me growing up as a kid, you are who you hang with, right? So like surrounding yourself with the best was always top of mind for us. And we're really fortunate that tonight we're surrounded by the best with you and Piersten. So thank you so much, Jarrod. Piersten, take us away. Talk to us about your career, and then in really simple terms, define your current job responsibilities.
Sure. So, like Jarrod, I grew up playing sports from an early age. I played basketball, soccer, and track. From the time I got into soccer when I was four years old. Like before I was even able to really get into it. I lived when I was in Dallas. We lived really close to a soccer field. So we would drive by it almost every single day. And so I was just itching to start playing myself. And so I started playing really early. And yeah, sports just really shaped my entire life. Of course, as soon as I moved to California, my closest friends in life that I still have to this day are from the sports that I played. The relationships that I built through sports have just lasted forever. So I just had a friend who was visiting here this past weekend who was from California, from my soccer team when I first moved, that I grew up with because I played soccer. So sports was not only, it was a competitive outlet for me. I loved the game. I loved competition, but it was also a place where I just found so much comfort because these were really like I built family on the soccer field and basketball court and in track. So it really defined me as I grew up. And once I got to high school, I had to narrow it down because everything was getting so competitive. So of course, with soccer, it was year round. I was traveling all over the country. And I really started focusing and honing in on soccer. And once I got to be like sophomore, junior, and school started recruiting, I had to make a decision. I mentioned earlier that I was really involved in student government growing up or in high school. So I was class president from sophomore year through senior year. And I made a decision in school that I wanted to go to a school that I could also, if I wanted to pursue a career outside of soccer, specifically in political science, I started doing a lot of research to figure out where were my role models in politics, what schools did they go to? And Columbia was that school. And so I made a decision to go to Columbia to play soccer, even though I had opportunities other places. And just to give everyone context, Columbia and the Ivy Leagues, at that point, I'm not sure how it is now, but they didn't give financial scholarships for sports. And so that was a conversation that I had to have with my parents. And I'm so fortunate that I had parents who, they really listened to me, and I'm fortunate that I had a really good idea and understanding of what I wanted out of my college. And they helped me. But I had offers other places where I was getting money, and I chose Columbia, where we ended up getting a little bit of financial aid, but in terms of soccer, we had to pay money, and Columbia is not cheap. So, and of course, just living expenses in New York, it's not cheap. And so thankfully I had supportive parents who went along with it. We said we're gonna figure it out as it goes along. And so by junior year I had committed to Columbia, and I majored in political science. And pretty early on I did an internship at my freshman year, the summer between my freshman and sophomore year. I came back to the Bay Area and did an internship with my district assembly woman. And I determined that politics wasn't for me. I liked it. There are a lot of things that I really liked about politics, but I decided that's not where I wanted to spend my career. But what I did learn about when I was in New York was the fashion industry. It was my first time that I was exposed to New York Fashion Week and just the energy around that. And, I saw, it was just, New York is the fashion capital, is one of the fashion capitals of the world. And I was just enamored with it. I wanted to figure out a way to be a part of it. And so while, like Jarrod said, while my first year, and I mean, throughout college, like soccer was everything. I was completely focused on soccer. I started trying to figure out different opportunities, um, ways that I could get involved in fashion. And so I started just like reaching out to different companies that I thought were interesting and started doing internships during the off season. And again, that was a conversation I had to have with my coach because a lot of people who played on this sports team, they weren't doing it because it's all about soccer. But I really wanted to make sure that I had some type of experience. I wanted to explore career options. So when I got out of school, I wasn't just like out stuck. And I will admit, it wasn't just me who was thinking that. My mom was very, she was always asking, what's next? If you're not going to be in politics, what is it? What are you doing? So I had someone over my shoulder who was asking me to continue, who was telling me to continue asking myself and do self-exploration to figure out what I wanted to do. But that's how I started getting into the fashion world. I did internships during my off season at Calvin Klein, at Prada. And then once I graduated, I took my first role was at Gilt Group, which doesn't exist anymore. I don't think it exists anymore. So a lot of the people who are in this audience probably don't know about what Gilt Group is, but Gilt Group is a luxury e-commerce website, and they specialized in flash sales. So at the time when the economy went down, a lot of people weren't spending money anymore. In 2007, 2008, people weren't spending money because there was a huge market crash, and so there was a rise in flash sale sites where people were looking for luxury items at extreme discounts, and Gilt Group was offering that, and they're one of the first companies to offer that. And so I was there in the early stages of it, and I started out in operations. And I moved about a year into the buying side of the business, which is really where, so operations is the back end of the business, where I was helping coordinate, get products from our vendors, from brands to our warehouses, and making sure that that process was smooth as possible so that we can get our orders out to our customers in a timely manner. And then about a year in, I really realized that I wanted to be on the front end of the business. I wanted to be a buyer. I wanted to be a merchandiser. And so I started working with the men's buying team, actually, in helping select the products that we sold to our customers. And I was working with the men's department. So I was working in tailored clothing and socks and underwear. And I learned so much about men's apparel and men's fashion. And it was just such a great experience. After a few years working at Gilt Group, I ended up moving to Bloomingdale's, where I was doing merchandising and buying, but more for the e-commerce. It was more on the e-commerce side. So there they had it split up between e-commerce and for the stores. And so I was focusing on the e-commerce, and I ended up focusing a lot more on not just the buying, but the merchandising, how people really, when you go to a website, how do you decide what you're going to select, and figuring out, doing a lot of analytics and watching how our customers were behaving on the site, and figuring out how to best make the website optimize so that people would want to buy. And so just for example, we know that our customers would come to, if they didn't find what they wanted within 5 clicks, they would leave. So it was my job to figure out how to get the right images in the right places so that our customers found what they wanted within those 5 clicks, so they wouldn't bounce from the site, is what we called it. And so that was my job. And after a couple of years of that, I loved being in the industry. I loved retail. I mean, I loved shopping online. And so it was great that I was able to spend my day doing what I love, shopping. After a few years of that, I realized that, part of my competitive nature, I wanted more. I knew I wanted to move up in the company. If I'm going to be at this company, I want to run it at some point. And I knew my political science background, it was probably going to take me a long time to get to where I wanted to be. A lot of politicking, you have to know the right person. You have the right person has to like you at the right time to move up. And I wanted to fast forward all of that. I knew if I wanted to run a fashion business. I didn't know if I wanted to start my own fashion business. I didn't know if I wanted to, run Bloomingdale's. I knew I wanted to run something though. And I knew I needed to get a really strong business background to get that done, because Columbia, while it was a great education, I didn't get a lot of business. Actually, at Columbia, at that time, because I was majored in political science, I didn't take one math course the entire time I was there. I didn't take one science course the entire time I was there. I was able to strictly focus on political science classes since I knew what I was going to do so early, which was great for if I wanted to, go into politics or go to law school. But for someone who wanted to run a business, I really did need that foundation. So I decided to go back to business school, or I decided to go back to school. I went to business school and studied really hard. It was a grind. That GMAT was a grind. And I ended up deciding to go to Harvard Business School. And at Harvard Business School, I had a lot of really great experiences. It was there that I really started learning about the entrepreneurial landscape, and really started seeing how achievable it was. And the thing, while I was there, I was still focused on, getting back into retail. My end goal was still to get back into retail or fashion. I had an internship between my 2 years at business school where I actually worked at Wayfair. But there was a huge problem that I was seeing while I was in business school. And it was a problem that I had my entire life, but it became glaringly obvious when I was in business school. So I had, moved around from California to New York to now Boston. And every time I moved around, I was trying to find, it was hard for me to find a place to get my hair done. I was always starting from scratch. I had some really terrible salon experiences. Like Brian mentioned, I actually went completely bald a few times. And once I got to business school, and I was looking for a place, a few of the girls in the year above me, I started learning that a lot of other women were having the same experiences that I had. A lot of other Black women were having the same experiences that I had. And I had known that from just growing up, but I never really thought about it until I was in an environment where people were trying to solve problems, like at business school. And a few of the women who were a year above me introduced me to this new salon concept called Dry Bar. And it was so fascinating to me that all of these, that this concept where you could go in and out and get in and out of the salon in under an hour, that it didn't matter what stylist you went to, all of them knew exactly what to do with your hair. And it was a nice, beautiful environment. This was a concept that I had never known of. And I had been going to salons my entire life. And I knew immediately when I heard about this concept that this wasn't for me. I couldn't, this was for the white girls. I couldn't go into a salon and just trust that they all knew what to do with my hair, because my hair is super, super kinky. And even some of the Black girls don't know what to do with my hair. I know that when I'm looking at this website, all those girls don't know what to do with my hair. And so I started doing more research about the industry and decided to start a concept just like that, but for women with highly textured hair. And so that's how Pressed Roots came to be. It was in business school that it came to be. I started doing pop-up shops to really test out the concept, to make sure that it was something that people would actually pay for, that this was a need that people really wanted beyond just me and my friends. It was something that people outside of my network wanted and were willing to pay for. And I tested everything about the business model, from the price that we were going to use, for how we were going to pay the stylist, for the environment, like how we were going to market it. And just did pop-ups in different cities, in Boston, Atlanta, in Dallas. And then we garnered enough attention and enough support, we had enough of a following from our customers that we were able to raise some money to open up our first storefront, which is here in Dallas, and it's doing really well. So well so that even though we opened in the pandemic, we were able to raise more money this past just last month, and we're opening up 2 more stores this year. Another store at the top of next year. So 3 stores. The raise that we just did, the money that we just raised is for 3 more stores. Brought on some really great people to the team, and we're growing. So it's really great to see the transformation of this business over the last year. And it's really it all came from the foundation of like testing and really understanding the market that we did when I was in business school.
Wow. You both have super impressive backgrounds. So number one, thank you so much for sharing. And number two, I think it's really exciting to see, 2 former college athletes, one of whom has created her own brand new startup organization, as well as someone who's investing in early stage startups to help those exact same type of companies grow and scale. So this is going to be a fun conversation. And for the bulk of our conversation this evening, we're going to directly link specific athletic skills with how you can apply them as high schoolers in your everyday life, both in your job as well as in the classroom. And so what we're going to do is I'll name a skill and give kind of a short prompt, and then we'll hear from both Jarrod and Piersten regarding their personal experiences and the stories that they have to share with us tonight. So to start, could you both talk with us about this first bit, which is time management? Athletes are accustomed to a meticulous, regimented schedule, often juggling multiple priorities and deadlines. How do you use your time management skills that you learned as an athlete in your everyday life now? And Jarrod, let's start with you on this one.
Great. Awesome. No, thanks, Brian. And I think it's such a important skill, such an important concept. And when I think about time management, right, I think it's unique in that we all have the same 24 hours, right? You can try to be subjective in some things, but I don't think time management you can be subjective on. It's a very objective skill, objective concept. And I think, for me as an athlete, and, I know Piersten, you mentioned your collegiate athletic experience, very similar to me. A lot of that is programmed, right? So you don't necessarily have to think about it. You have a coach, you have a director of operations, you have a recruiting coordinator, you have an academic advisor, you have a number of folks who are reaching out to you, reminding you about things you may need to do, right? You may have a very similar experience in high school with your coach or a teacher, whoever it may be, or a parent. When I think you transition into then the professional world, you don't have that many people who are reminding you of what you need to do. That person then becomes you and reminding yourself what you need to do. And so I think for me, right, I've tried to be as very intentional as I can about my own personal time management, because I think how you use your time is a direct correlation to what you value, right? So if you just want to do a quick audit or self-assessment of yourself, go through your calendar, whether that's a handwritten planner, whether you use your phone, or if you don't, have any type of system, just think about what you've done last week, right? And think about, what you were generating, and think about where you want to go and the outcomes or things you want to get to. And does your actions day to day align with the outcomes you hope to achieve? That's really what I try to hold myself accountable to, and really try to reverse engineer all of those outcomes into how I'm spending my time. So Piersten, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I love the way you say the self audit. I think that's really important. So I have a planner that I at the beginning of each week I assess what I need to get done by the end of the week, and or what my goals are for the end of the week. Whether it's they can be as big as like I need to set up a meeting with this person. I need to do this. I need whatever it is. And every single day I'm figuring out, I figure out what I need to do to get to that end goal for the week. And what I like to do is give myself spurts of like free time. So I'm extremely, extremely focused during in spurts of 50 minutes. And I'll put a timer on my clock on my phone, and I will Yeah, I'll put a timer on my phone where I don't have Instagram on. I don't have any internet. There's airplane mode. Nobody's calling me. Nobody's texting me, and I am just focused for 50 minutes. I'm doing nothing but the task that I have on my to-do list for the day that's going to get me to my end goal for the week. And that's what's worked really good for me. After that, when the timer goes off, I'm free. I can eat a snack. I can look at my phone. I can look at Instagram real quick. But I know when I get back to that 50 minutes where I'm in the zone, I'm super productive. And that's 50 minutes, 50. I'll do a 50-minute time spurt. And you'll be surprised at what you can get done in 50 minutes. You get so much done when you are doing nothing. What the time management piece that I think is just, it's what's so hard now is just there's so many distractions. But when you can focus for a straight 50 minutes, you can get a lot done. And so that's my tip. I don't know. I would recommend people to try it if you have issues with all the distractions that are around. It's worked for me.
Piersten, I love that. These little bite-sized moments, right, that are almost a little bit more snackable in terms of productivity. Rebecca, my co-founder, loves to set her tomato timer for 50 minutes, 50, and just like jam. So between that and like doing this life audit that you described, Jarrod, I think it's absolutely brilliant. Assessing where you spend your time and being efficient with it, because it's entirely limited. There's only 24 hours in the day. So next up, Piersten, talk to us about competitive fire. The competition very clearly drives performance in both sports and in the professional world. So talk to us about how you've harnessed your athletic competitiveness in your careers.
Yeah, I really believe it's interesting. So I talked a little bit throughout my career about how I changed from, being in operations to being on a buying team to being in like more merchandising. And all of that really was a function of me, like my movement in my career, my success in my career, and then even to where I am now to start my own business, all really came from this fire that's inside of me to always be better. And I look for this when I'm hiring for stylists now, for my company, and even any position in my company now. I look for people with that internal desire and drive to win. When I first got into when I first started at Go Group and I was in operations, I wasn't there to just, of course, I needed money, I needed a paycheck, I needed to pay my bills, of course, but it's not inside of me. And I think it was bred in me because of sports. It was inside of me. I'm not just going to chill in my job and just collect a check. I'm there to be the best I can be. I want to be good. And like I mentioned, when I was in high school, I'm in student government right now. I'm not here. My aspirations aren't to be in politics. I want to be the president, and so that was all a function. I really believe that was a function of sports. I want to win, and it has helped me tremendously throughout life. And throughout your career, when you don't show up, you don't just show up to a job. You're not there to just get a paycheck. You're not there to just coast. You need to be there. You need to show up and see how you can be the best you can be, how you can make this company better, how you can make this company win. And that should always be the mindset that you take into anything that you do. If you're volunteering, how am I going to, what is the goal of this volunteering project? How am I going to make that outcome happen? I think that internal competitive nature is the only thing that has helped me it's the only thing that's really made me keep going.
I totally agree with you, Piersten. I totally agree. So when it comes to competitive drive, I really think about two things. Number one, most importantly, I think it's incredibly hard to be a competitor if you're surrounded by folks who are not competitive, right? So I think it's first really thinking about the environment that you're in, and a quick example here, when I got to a place like Ohio State and, I played defensive back, I played corner and safety, and the receivers I'm going against in practice, I went against four 4 first-round draft picks in practice. And so you talk about the competitive drive that you have to have when you surround yourself with those type of individuals. It's only going to activate your potential and only bring out the best, or, reveal where you're really at. I think that's number one. And then number two, what does that look like to really translate into the professional world? I think, I would challenge each and every one of you to really think about your definition of success and your definition of what it means to win. Right. And so for me, I think early in my career, I was just trying to get the quick win. Or if I'm going, quote unquote, one-on-one with somebody, I just want to win once. Right. I think if you talk to true, executives, folks who have been in the space a long time and really won on a high level, it's not, can you just win once, but can you win 9 out of 10 times? Can you really have that repeatable success and continue to build on, in a sense, the success you've had in the past? And I only think that comes through a motor inside of yourself, a personal drive, desire to be the best you can be within yourself, simply because, when you're an athlete and say you're, a high school athlete and you're competing against other folks in your district, or you're competing against other folks in your state, when you transition to the professional realm, one big thing for me is you realize you're competing against folks across the world. Right. There's not just, people from the state of Texas who are applying to the job you may be interested in. It's a large applicant pool. And so having that personal drive that's already inside of you is only going to help you go above and beyond those expectations.
Oh man, Jarrod, you're getting me super worked up about like scope, right? Because we only know what's right in front of us and how we judge ourselves based on our peers, right? So this idea of zooming out to say we are all part of a global marketplace now. This is not, just right here in Dallas, Texas. This is not here in North Texas. We are competing globally. So I love where your head is at, and I love how you frame that in terms of scope. So our third and our fourth traits almost go hand in hand. So Jarrod, lead us off here and talk to us about the importance of collaboration and cooperation, in particular, as it relates to being able to communicate and work with people who are different from you.
I think that's huge. That is huge. I was reading a tweet earlier this morning by Adam Grant. Adam Grant is a professor at Wharton, University of Pennsylvania. So for you Ivy League folks, there you go, Piersten, quick plug there. He was saying that true leadership only comes when the individuals around you perform better, right? And so you think about collaboration, you think about communication, 2 fundamental aspects of, in a sense, creating cohesion. And you hear these words of culture, and you hear these words of team bonding and development, right? That really, comes through the environment in which either you create or you are a part of, right? And we're all contributing to something. So how you speak, how you act to your teammates, how you speak, how you act to your coaches, and vice versa, how your coaches act towards you, that's all part of this living and breathing culture that each and every one of you are part of. And so as you think about that, right, being that the culture has a huge influence on your ultimate success as a team, what can you do to contribute to that individually? Right. So you think about, again, collaboration and communication, and really thinking about the power of your voice and what you can do individually to contribute to your team in your role. And I think that starts by knowing exactly what your role is. Right. As I mentioned, I started my career as a walk-on. I did not come in as a 5-star recruit. I started literally my redshirt freshman year on the scout team, getting beat up every single day, and then not playing in the game. That does something to you psychologically as a redshirt. Right. For those of you who go into college and may redshirt or may not, that takes, again, you talk about competition and competitive drive to keep improving on your own. That is not an easy thing. Right. But at the time, I knew if I was going to take the next step, I had to own my current role. So I was aware of my communication. I was aware of the role I played on the team, because guess what happened? When I was a starter, I needed folks on the scout team to run those plays to in a sense, play that role in order for me to then be the best at my role. But that wouldn't have happened if I didn't go through that experience and have the level of empathy. Again, so I go on this forever, but I think you get what I'm saying. So I'll pass it to you, Piersten.
Yeah, Jarrod, I really love that, knowing your role and having the context of how you fit into the bigger picture of the company. I will just give an example of my career when I was at Guild Group. So I started out in operations, like I said. the reason I was able to transition to the merchandising business team, the merchandising and buying team, was because I did a project with the merchandisers, and I started to really understand what they did. And because of the success of that project, I was recruited to work for them. So in terms of, if you know you want to move within a company, building those great relationships and having great communication skills is really, really important. Because in any company, no matter how small or how big, it's never going to be just you. It's never going to be just your team. So it's important, of course, within your team. So for me, it was the operations team that I was able to communicate with people, and I was able to get the job done, and we knew what our goals were. But know what the greater organization's goals are, and what each department and what each team, how they play a role to make that the greater company succeed. Because once you start understanding and once you start having empathy for the other departments, the communication is so much easier. And a lot of times, especially now, I'm assuming, especially now that we are not in the same building as the other teams, you're really doing a lot of emails, you're doing a lot of phone calls. Or at that point, we were when I was at Guild Group, we had a team in Brooklyn, and we had a team in New York City, in Manhattan. And what I was realizing was that there ended up being a lot of tension between the teams in Brooklyn and the team in Manhattan, just because a lot of times, a lot of the communication, because we weren't in the same office, we weren't able to communicate, we weren't communicating in person a lot. Things were getting lost in translation. And because people weren't really aware of what the goals of the other team were, things got lost in translation. So what I would say is, whenever in doubt, pick up the phone, call people from the other teams, get an understanding of what other people are working on, what their goals are, what's stressing them out. Is anything that you're doing on your side contributing to that stress? A lot of times we have different deadlines, we have different goals that sometimes can be in conflict, just because the companies can be so big and we're not always on the same page. So it's really important that communication, that collaboration, really getting an understanding of what everybody else's goals and objectives are, is just the best foundation for making sure that you can all be successful in your roles. And it gives you opportunities too to move within the company and figure out what you get, an opportunity to understand what other areas of the company might be interesting to you. And if you build those relationships, it's so much easier to transition into different roles and to grow in the company or grow in your own career, because of networking.
I love so much of what both of you just said. It's almost like this idea of, big companies are more like a football team or like a soccer team, where you have multiple moving parts, lots of specialization, and being able to communicate across those individual team segments, if you will, is really crucial. And a startup environment is going to be more like a basketball team, right? Where everyone is working seamlessly together, all at the same time, in a way where you must communicate with your teammates in order so that everyone stays on the same page. So I love where y'all are going. So with that, we're now going to open up for some questions for the audience. And this first one comes from one of our Trey coaches. So he wants to know about coachability. He says, athletes often develop a willingness to learn and adapt based on their coaching, and the ability to receive and apply feedback and to be held accountable, he thinks is probably crucial for professional success. Can you two tell us about how being coachable has created opportunities and helped you grow in your work?
I'll start. Sure. Absolutely. I go into every situation, and I think it's really valuable to go into every situation with the idea of what can I learn. You don't know. There's always room to learn. There's always room to grow. I started a business in the hair industry, and I've never done hair. The only context I had was I had gotten my hair taken off my head like multiple times. So I've gone bald, but like I had never gone to cosmetology school, didn't know anything about hair. I started a salon industry. So I started a salon. And so it was extremely important that I was very humble. I still learn every single day from my stylist that I hired, from everybody on my team who I put people around me that are just so educated and so know everything about this industry. And I get coached every single day on a company that I own. So in that, of course, from the beginning of your career, when you really have never been in a professional environment before, when you've never it's to when you're seasoned, you're always going to be learning from the people around you. It's important to put yourself in those situations where you aren't the smartest person in the room. There's a problem if you are, but you should always be yearning to learn more, reaching out to people. I'm constantly reaching out to people in the industry to learn, to just figure out if there's something else that I need to learn to make this company better. So yes, coachability, humbling yourself, and knowing that you don't know everything, that's critical.
I couldn't agree more, Piersten. And, I'll keep it brief. Talent will only take you so far. It will only take you so far. Each and every one of us has some layer of cap on our abilities, right? Whether that's athletically, academic, whatever it may be. And likely you could get to the next level faster, in a sense, the more willing you were to receive that feedback. And I think it's so important to, as Piersten said, have that mindset of a learner. And one of my favorite coaches, his name was Greg Schiano, who I played for and then worked for. He's a head coach at Rutgers football now. He would tell us a story because Coach Schiano was a coach of the Chicago Bears during the Jordan era while he was with the Bulls. And he would go and watch practice. And he would say, after observing practice, he said every single year, Jordan would relearn the triangle offense. He would act as if he didn't even know what the triangle offense, and this is Jordan, right? Like this isn't your other folks on the roster. Like this is Jordan. He would relearn the triangle offense. So if Jordan would take the time to do that, as elite as he was, why surely we can do in a sense our own diligence on our end. So for me, that's really the mindset I've taken. What that looks like tactically is I implement multiple coaches in my life professionally, right? A coach, can help me from a professional standpoint on the job, a coach who can help me from a relationship standpoint, a coach who can help me from a financial standpoint. Because really all that is putting people in your life who are going to give you that honest feedback when you need it. Not, hey, great job, when it actually wasn't that great. You need people who are going to speak truth into your life, whether you like it or not, because that ultimately will really get you to the next level. Again, Brian, back to what you shared at the beginning of those who are around you and the importance of that. If those 5 people aren't speaking truth, and I mean like truth of, hey, Jarrod, you're out of line, or Jarrod, you really need to tighten this up to get to the next level, or Jarrod, I've seen you've been slacking off, right? I truly believe that feedback is one of the greatest forms of love. Right. Oftentimes we think about feedback like, oh, I don't want to hear that. But it's ultimately, if you think about it, it's one of the greatest forms of love because you care so much about that person. You want them to reach their full potential. So I say all that to say, I think it's so important to have that mindset and that openness ultimately in order to get to where you want to go.
Trey athletes, you heard it here first from a former Clemson, Ohio State, and LA Rams coach himself. So be coachable and try to make sure that you seek out those people who are going to hold you accountable and make you better every single day. So we have time for one more question, which we didn't get a chance to talk about work ethic and how athletes, especially who have gone through 2-a-days and get up before sunrise to practice or lift, know how to apply their work ethic from sports into life, or talking about healthy dose of resilience and how we can overcome adversity and challenges and develop mental toughness like we have through sports. So instead, for this last one, our Trey athlete wants to know in a much more general way, what do you two wish you knew when you were in high school that would have made a difference in your professional careers? And Piersten, if we want to kick off, let's start with you.
That's a really good question. Let me think about that. Honestly, I would bring it back to the resilience. When you're in high school, of course, games get tough, and you build a sense of resilience. But once you get to college, it's a different level. Once you get out into the real world, it's a different level. Once you even think about starting a business, shoot, like you got to keep going. And the amount of no's, the injuries, the all of everything. Keep going. Like there are many times when I thought that press roots wasn't going to be anything. I got so many no's. I got so many people who told me that nobody would fund this business, nobody would invest in it. I got even when I was in college, when it came to just pursuing an internship, that was a conversation that I had to have with my coach. Initially, I got that rule changed. Initially, we weren't allowed to do internships in the off season, and that's no longer a rule for women's soccer at Columbia, because it was something that I really wanted, and I didn't just take the rule or the answer as it was. It's all about it's not an easy, there's nothing about life that's easy. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the Kardashians and have all the money in the world, or whoever you are. There are challenges, and that resilience is super important. Being able to get back up when you fall down, being able to not take no for an answer, keep going, keep knocking on that door, bang down that door and make a way. If you believe in something, if you want to do something, go after it. So yeah, if I had any, I thought in high school, I thought things were going to be easy. I thought, I got this soccer, I'm going to Columbia for soccer. I'm about to be president of the United States. It's clear. It's not easy. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of banging down doors that people put up in your face. You got to keep going.
Never let someone tell you no. The Piersten Gaines rule is they tell you can't do an internship, write your own rules, right? So that's absolutely awesome, Piersten. Thank you so much. And Jarrod, close us out here. Talk to us about what you wish you knew when you were in high school, which would have dramatically impacted you in your professional career.
Brian, I would have been very intentional about what I exposed myself to. If you aren't familiar, there's a podcast called I Am Athlete. It's done by Brandon Marshall, Chad Ochocinco, a few other guys who do it. And Brandon Marshall said a phrase that exposure leads to expansion, right? And I think about the things that I exposed myself to in high school, and some were positive, some were negative, right? I would have been very, if I could go back and do it all over again, very intentional about who I exposed myself to as far as people, what I exposed myself to as far as activity, influences, whatever it may be, because at the end of the day, that's really the foundation in which you're building on, right? It's such a formative time in your life, and how you're forming your own perspective and forming your own belief. Would really encourage you to take that serious, because at the end of the day, we're the sum total of our habits. And one of the most crucial times of building our habits, exactly like Piersten said, she developed a lot of that resilience in high school, right? A very similar experience. I got 110 no's from 110 Division I institutions who said, no, Jarrod, you can't play here. But all I was listening for were those 3 yeses that I got. That's all I needed in order to have that self-belief. Why? Because I was intentional about who I exposed myself to, and still continuing to do that today. So that would be my encouragement.
Excellent. I think that's what we've tried to bring to our Trey athletes through this conversation, through our entire 10-week program. So Trey athletes, if there's one thing that you take away, exposure builds experience, right? And with that, our Q&A and Trey season 3 in terms of our fireside chats has now come to a close. Piersten and Jarrod, thank you so much through your incredible stories and experiences. You've been able to talk with us tonight, obviously, about applying leadership skills through sport as a part of Trey Season 3. But what's really incredible is the wisdom that you've imparted upon all of us. So in advance of passing it back to LaJoy, 2 quick notes for the audience. Number 1, please stick around for just a minute because LaJoy has a few reminders in advance of us finalizing our event. And number 2, we're getting ready to launch a quick poll right now. So please complete this before you leave. And last but not least, on behalf of every single one of our Trey athletes, families, coaches, employees, Jarrod and Piersten, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being here to talk to us tonight. It means the absolute world to us. Both of you are true inspirations. Thank you so much. And with that, we are passing it back to LaJoy to call it a close.
What an amazing way for us to end our Fireside Chat series with this conversation with both of you. Thank you so much for everything that you shared with us. Definitely echoing all of Ryan's sentiments. We appreciate you being here with us tonight and closing us out. So thank you to all of our participants who joined us tonight. I hope you were able to gain as much insight as I was from this conversation with Piersten and Jarrod. We really are thankful for them for being here with us tonight. A few quick reminders. We do have our end of year celebration happening this Thursday. Make sure you sign up for that. The link is going to be dropped into the chat right now. And at that end of year celebration, we will be announcing the winners of our social media competition. So make sure you are engaging with us and tagging us at Trey Athletes. We'll drop that in the link in the chat as well as a reminder. And coaches, if you have athletes who were not able to be a part of this amazing conversation tonight, don't worry. We'll be posting this on our YouTube channel so that you and your athletes can watch this live. Check us out on Instagram where we'll be posting when that's available. Also, coaches, we know you'll be hosting your final debrief sessions in the coming weeks. So make sure you're also having your athletes fill out those debrief session surveys so that we can get feedback and we can continue to improve our programming so that it can be the best for your athletes. With that, we thank everyone who's been a part of this tonight, and to athletes everywhere, good night.